I'm coming to one of those international speakers, and I'm happy to have Martin Kenney here up on stage. Welcome, Martin. Martin is from University of California, Davis. He is an expert in industry-university relationships and regional economies. He has been studying and researching, in particular, the dynamics of entrepreneurial high-tech regions. And lately has, in particular, worked on the social impact of platforms and new technology, how that transforms the future of work and what the impact may be on workers, whether they will be augmented by those technologies or rather replaced. And then there is another fact, and I have to say that, Martin, anytime you go for a dinner with Martin, he will choose a really excellent wine. Because UC Davis is right next to Napa Valley, the wine region of California. So if you really want to have a nice wine, make yourself a dinner with Martin. Thanks very much for being here. Your stage. Please welcome Martin Kenney.
Thank you, Guido, and thank you to the sponsors of this, this wonderful conference. I'm going to give a deliberately West Coast perspective. And I think it was wonderful because Reinhold gave a German perspective. And you'll be able to see the differences in the way the two places are thinking. And, you know, one is not right or wrong. I think what's going to happen is going to be kind of a merger of these ways of thinking. So what I'm going to go through is something that John Zeisman and I at BRI have been thinking about, which is digital platforms and the platform economy, and I'm going to focus on the West Coast firms. Okay, and I'm going to go through a few interesting slides to give you a perspective of how we think the world is changing. Okay, so in the platform economy, metaphorically, the reorganization of the capitalist economy is in which digital platform owners are developing power that is stronger than that of the factory owners in the Industrial Revolution, or even Ford with his assembly line. Data, in some sense, is the new oil. And algorithms and software are the capital goods that create and extract value and create wealth. And I think Reinhold was actually pointing to that when he talked about the software in these machines, because that software is capital too. Algorithms are always changing and always evolving. The other thing that we're seeing is a world of constant change, right? The Google search algorithm is evolving every day or every 2 days, and every 6 months it's evolving in a big way. Okay? So when you think about a world like that, this is a world of change that is at an accelerated rate because it's in the software and it's in the data. Life is being reorganized. The way people are getting news and information is being rewired. We know that. The New York Times, et cetera, is not the only way that people are getting information. My students don't get information by reading the New York Times. I talk about reading a newspaper either online or physically, and they look at me and they think I'm crazy. I'm in some other world. 33% of all US marriages started online. That's happening. It's just the way it is. I mean, those are your customers. At the end of the supply chain, maybe ThyssenKrupp is down very deep in the supply chain, but their customers are dealing with that world that's changing. Supervision, rating systems. Today, I was just in China, I said, oh, how do you know a restaurant? And we look at WeChat. WeChat tells them which restaurant to go to, right? Not the reviewer for the New York Times, et cetera, or for Spiegel or whomever. That's changing things profoundly. Privacy. Well, even in Europe, you're worried about privacy, but with facial recognition software out on the street, well, who knows about privacy? And so these issues are changing our world and change the world that all of us work in, be the academics or industry leaders. Platform giants. Most recently in the US stock market, seven of the 10 most valuable firms in the world were platform firms. In 2002, there was Microsoft, and then all these other firms that have dropped out of the leadership role. In valuation now, maybe we're in a stock market bubble, but does anyone really believe that these firms are going to drop out in value terms? 2 of them are Chinese. Tencent and WeChat. Tencent on Alibaba. That's a big change in our world. It's showing major shifts that are not just digital, shifts that are whose economy is rising, et cetera, et cetera. All of the countries are going to have to play in this new world. This is Google. These are Google products. It's a straight line because I don't have points, right? But Google and Android are there at 2 billion users. 2 billion users globally. How many people are there in the world? 8 billion? 2 billion users. I use Google Drive. Oopsie. Google Drive over there. Introduced in 2015, 750 million users. 3 years. That's kind of a lot of people, particularly if you can't have the China market. You're closed out of the China market. Just to give you a perspective of some of the changes that we're looking at and some of the changes that are going to affect all of us, are affecting all of us, and will continue to affect us over the next 10, 20 years. This is the messages per day, various platforms. WhatsApp, over 50 billion messages a day. You want to talk about connectivity? What kind of connectivity is this? Right? And of course, this is in the consumer side. This is sort of where the Americans and the West Coast are very powerful. But those messages are going to be in the industrial world too, in a different way. But that kind of connectivity is one of the things that we're dealing with. Yes, your Mittelstand and your industry is a little further away from the enormous speed on the consumer sector, but we believe at Bree that it's going to affect all sectors. This is Amazon. Amazon, as we all know, started selling books up there. They have 32 million books available on Amazon, 400 million different SKUs, different products available on Amazon, both from Amazon itself and increasingly for all of the shops on Amazon. If you look at Amazon's growth in sales, the shops are actually growing faster than Amazon itself. Amazon is organizing the retail trade. Retail is being reorganized today. In the United States, I can't say about Europe, I don't know. In China, for sure. WeChat is reorganizing and Alipay are reorganizing retail in China. You can talk about China and the US, I don't know about Europe, but my guess is you're going the same direction. So, not only that, Amazon Web Services. Amazon is integrating down into the logistics chain. In the B2C sector today, but in the B2B sector tomorrow, right? Electrical parts distribution. Why can't Amazon take that over? Amazon's got the trucks, Amazon's got the warehouses, Amazon has the air freight, Amazon now has its own ships, right, to connect with China in particular. But what's so interesting about Amazon? In each of these, not only do they have their own ships, they contract out to UPS, to FedEx. So they contract out that way, so they can compare. They can put base load, they can take the base load, they can give the peak load to UPS or FedEx. How would you like to be in a business like that, where you get peak load and I get base load? Not only the other side of it is, for their sales, they will offer, if you sell as an Amazon shop, if you sell, they will offer you to do your warehousing for you. Both sides, platform after platform. Every red is a new platform that they're creating as they're driving down into the distribution, the warehousing, the wholesaling system. Europeans are worried about Google. They should think about Amazon. Amazon is the giant. Google is a giant. Amazon is the one that's starting to change the way things are being distributed. Just giving you a flavor here of the kind of research we're doing at Bree. And so I'm going to go through this very quickly because I don't have enough time. Retail. This is e-commerce as a % of retail sales. The red line is China. That's the smartphone right there at 2009. This is transformation. 10% of US retail is now online, growing about 0.75% a year. 45% of that is Amazon. In China, that's Alipay and WeChat Pay. Disintermediating the banks. Banks, fairly important institutions in society, have to understand where they may sit in the future. United States and Europe are all behind. South Korea has now dropped behind, and China's continuing to grow. Continuing to grow as a percent. Online brands, new online retail brands. You could start a store today in your house, start advertising on Instagram, start advertising on Facebook, put your shop on Amazon, connect to the global supply chain to have your product made in China or Bangladesh. You've got a brand. You've got a product. You're a company. And you can do it 2, 3, 4 years. If it gets hot, you know how your children are using their smartphones. If it gets hot, they'll know about it and they'll buy online, particularly if you give them a nice credit card, right? This is happening. This is kind of old stuff, but it's happening and it's going to happen even more quickly. If you're Hermes, you have to think about what is your strategy in a world like this where a new quality brand could appear very quickly and start to undercut you. Okay. Machinery industries. Guido asked me to put a slide in here. I'm not an expert on machinery industry, and after Reinhold, I feel embarrassed, so I'll give just a few thoughts. They may be completely out to lunch, but we'll try anyway. So, is the machinery industry different? Yes. Digital and analog are different. That ability to know the atoms, right? I come from UC Davis. We've got this stuff called wine, right? Virtual wine. I don't know how many of you are interested in it. But, those are atoms. So, we have to be careful. So the digital and analog are different. No, as Reinhold pointed out to us, software is increasingly an important part of every machine his company makes. No, all software will not be open sourced. He gave us some examples of how you're going to deal with that when you have to share data, but you're sharing the guts of your firm. So what are the boundary resources you need? So, proprietary software will still be the norm in some way. So that tension will have to be dealt with. But the customers may push you to conform. You need to conform. So the pressure is going that way. Well, firms with very specialized skills can resist. I'm sure Reinhold and his firm are always thinking about what kind of resistance as my customer is pushing me to open the kimono, right? Or his vest. He's always thinking about that. He has to think about that. So that's a tension that the machinery industry will deal with that's different from the consumer side. Okay, it's different from the consumer side. But some of the pressures are still pushing, I believe, on him. No AI can substitute for the worker's skills. Skilled, trained labor remains vital. I mean, that's what you Germans have done so well. But how you're going to make that balance in a more turmoiled world, where those skills may have to change more quickly, I think is one of the issues you'll deal with. We need skilled labor, but often our tools can de-skill either our labor or our customers. With the wonderful robots that he's developing, maybe his customers don't need the skills that they had. The Italian packaging industry. The packaging machineries will continue, but the people in the factories that are doing the packaging, Coca-Cola, their skills may decrease. So these are some of the tensions we need to think through in the machinery industry. But as I said, I'm not an expert. Guido asked me for a slide, so I gave some ideas. The automobile value chain, fairly important for Germany. The interesting thing about digital is it's sneaky. It seeps in places where you never would have expected it, right? And each of those may change a different part of the supply chain. So, supply chain platforms, assemblers, suppliers. Who controls the platform? Whose software is there at the center of the platform? That's a place for value extraction from the whole chain. Car sales. Car sales in the United States have changed completely. Used to be the dealer knew everything and you knew nothing. Today I buy a car, I look online, I find out more or less what the price is. I go to 3 dealers, I say, these are the prices. Which of you give me the best deal? Then to the local guy, I say, the guy across, 30, 50 miles away, he's giving me this price. Either you give me this price or forget it, I'll go to him. And the local guy always does it, right? Because he doesn't want to lose the business. But that's changing the customer relationship. Didi, Uber, Lyft, Reinhold, and everybody's mentioned that. Maps. Baidu, the German auto industry buying Nokia Maps. Nokia Maps not as good as Google Maps. Will Google, with its maps, be able to extract the value? And how much of that? Well, there's X amount of value. If I get 10% and you had 20% and some of it has to come out of you, I'm the winner, right? That's what Google's looking at. Google's looking at, they don't want to make cars. They might make some cars, but that's not it. Get the maps in there, extract the value. Data upload, download, we've talked about that. Autonomous vehicles, another possibility. So Reinhold again took all of my thunder. What is the driving experience when it's an autonomous vehicle? Right? These are the kinds of issues I think we need to think about. So the value change will change, and therefore value creation and capture are likely to change. It's capitalism. Who captures the value? Right? Microsoft software captured far more of the value than the cost of the software they developed because they were able to extract it from the rest of the chain. That's what this story is about. So some concluding thoughts. Platform owners will have great power over those in the ecosystem. In the industrial side, of course, the firms are going to think a lot more about giving away the core. The consumer side is quite clear what's going on. How will the consumer side map on the B2B side? We don't know yet. Chinese payment systems are becoming a duopoly. What happens when a payment system becomes a duopoly? There's 2 ways to pay. WeChat, Alipay. Credit cards, oh yeah, a little bit, but right? What happens then? If I can control all the commerce, will I be able to extract extra value? Of course I will. Amazon becoming the dominant retailer affects not only the other retailers, but affects FedEx and UPS. Indirect effects. As these big changes in the supply chain occur, there's not only the direct effect, but there's the indirect effect. Have to think about these. These are going to be very powerful. Industry boundaries becoming blurred due to data. New entrants. New entrants in a particular part of the supply chain, of your full supply chain. Right? So not just new entrants is directly against you, but against your whole value proposition, little pieces of that value proposition. But it might be a little piece that can be transformed into a big node of power and control. These are the kinds of things that I think managers today, I know are thinking about, but become very, very, very hard to predict because as boundaries blur, it's hard to say where your competitor is coming from and in which part of your business. Okay, the new entrants. All right, I have some slides I wasn't able to show you of new entrants in various businesses. But what's so interesting is they're not in just one part of, let's say, retail. They're in a variety of different pieces of retail. Right? So again, a firm is a set of functions that they perform to create value. Any one of those functions may be attacked. It's hard to say which one will be attacked. Okay. Value chains can receive new intermediaries with data. New intermediaries appear. If they can get again, a foothold in that chain, they start to change where power is. Okay, so I need to wrap up here. Customers. Who are they? Where are they? Right? These online brands, the customers are global, right? Who are your customers and where are they and how are they changing? Because they're changing also. Again, perhaps this is more B2C than B2B, but I think it's important. How do they get information? How do people get information today versus how do they get information yesterday? And how will they get information tomorrow? Right? Because you're dealing with tomorrow. How do your customers, here more B2C, how do customers experience their lives? I'm always struck when I see young people. I'm blessed to be a college professor of young students, and I'm struck every 3 to 4 years, it's completely different. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? Right? It's that quick. And does anybody use Facebook anymore? Your parents, right? Me, right? But nobody else uses Facebook. My students don't use Facebook. They use Instagram, which of course is Facebook, but what do your customers want and need? What are the experiences that they want and need, and how are they different? How does a firm communicate with customers? Another issue, changing constantly. And then, of course, who mediates the relationship with your customers? Today, for Nike, who's mediating the relationship with their customers? To some degree, Amazon, right? So these are some of the issues that we're thinking about and trying to think through at BRE. We obviously don't have answers, but these are what we're interested in. What is Europe's place? Is it just reining in the West Coast firms in some way? Is that a positive vision? Protecting old models of competition? Obviously, here in Germany, you're starting to think through part of that with the Industry 4.0. Who are the European champions? Is it Spotify? This is simply not an important firm, to be blunt. It's a very successful firm. There's no reason today that, particularly in the spaces I'm talking about, that Europe will generate a competitor that will be better than the American giants, but you never know because the industry is changing constantly, so it's certainly possible. Is a European vision possible? Is it to build platforms based on another set of social values? Could it be privacy, social solidarity, et cetera? I think that issue is on the European agenda. Do you have a vision that's compelling? Because if you don't, Google and Amazon, clearly, you look at your children, look at yourself, have a compelling vision. The Chinese are developing a compelling vision. Will it get out of the China market is a little bit difficult. It already is outside. Tencent, for example, has about 25% of the global gaming market now. So, you shouldn't count the Chinese out in this. And China is very serious. And we're getting technologies like AI and machine learning that may again change. Who's the winner and who's the loser? So I think you in Europe have to think, you may want to think, you don't have to do anything, you may want to think about, do you have a compelling vision for the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world is changing also, even as you're changing. So with that, I will end, and I hope I haven't taken too much time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Martin, for your views. In part, I guess, very good that we have a little bit of a pause to kind of let that sink in a little bit. If I may have one question on that, I mean, you've clearly shown and said that in your wrap-up also that there are all those American giants obviously being very successful in forming those platforms. How do you rate the social impact? So is the fact that you have those players in the US resulting in, say, something like a better economy, welfare, and well-being of?
Well, so I mean, that's a very good question, and it isn't just the digital platforms that are affecting American inequality and the issues in the United States about fairness, et cetera. So it isn't just the digital platforms. It's in a way, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, many of you probably use Amazon and like it. Some of you might use Google search and find it valuable. Some of you may use Wikipedia. So these are creating value, social value. Now, the way the wealth that is being created is being distributed is another question, right? And I think that's a question that we in the United States are not addressing, but we certainly should address, is wealth distribution. Because I didn't go into digital platform economics, they tend to be winner take all. How many of you are not using Google search? Probably very few of you. How many of you are not using probably Gmail or Chrome, right? So they tend to be winner-take-all markets. In winner-take-all markets, right, it isn't like Reinhold competing against Kenney. No. Reinhold's not in the game in the digital space if he's not the winner, right? So the distribution is very different. You can have Kenney, you can have ThyssenKrupp, you can have Otis, et cetera, so you can have a number of firms competing, right? Search, it's Google, Facebook, right? So that makes income distribution very different and wealth distribution very different because it's all concentrated at the top, at the winner. So I think we as societies, not only the United States, but global societies do need to think about if this industry goes very digital, how will the wealth be distributed? Who will be the winners? Who will be the losers? I didn't talk about ecosystems, right? All of these firms create ecosystems. But the owner of the ecosystem, the platform owner, is always in a position to extract wealth from everybody in the ecosystem or look at a particular business that you created and say, I'm going to now put this in the platform. The torch on your smartphone was developed as an app by an entrepreneur for Apple. And Apple said, this is a wonderful thing, and it should just be pulled in and put into the phone. Where was the app owner then? It was zero, right? So we're talking about power. And so I think you're raising the question, and that is the role of the state. What is the role of the state here? Right? The U.S. general feeling is we don't need the state anymore, right? Uber doesn't need the laws. They're going to do what they want, right? Break the rules and ask forgiveness later. And that's sort of a U.S. perspective, which creates enormous dynamism. But I think also creates the other side, which is the potential for great inequality. And of course, we're leaders in creating great inequality. That's a negative. I'm smiling, but it's negative. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer to your question, but that's sort of how I think I'm thinking about these issues.
Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts. Martin, I think it's a very challenging situation, and I think the role of the state is something that we would or that we should consider significantly. And let's say that we are a little bit behind digitalization in Europe is a chance, at least in this aspect, we have a little bit more time to discuss as our industry is transforming a little bit later than it did already in the US. Thanks very much for being here, Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.